All right, so today we're going to take a look at a case that's, well, it's pretty disturbing, to be honest with you, and it's a story that absolutely captivated Japan, and really for good reason.
It is one of those cases that just gets under your skin, doesn't it, when you start to peel back the layers and see the different elements at play.
Exactly. So we're talking about a case that begins with a seemingly straightforward death, right? A man found dead in his car, apparent suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning.
And given Japan's struggles with loneliness and their unfortunately high suicide rates, it makes sense that the authorities had initially accepted it as just that omen.
A suicide.
Yeah, and you can see how that initial assumption, right, there's just another sad but unfortunately common occurrence. It could lead investigators to overlook crucial details.
Oh, absolutely, especially when a death appears to fit a familiar narrative.
Right, so let's talk about the victim in this case, 49-year-old Yuki. And on the surface, he had a pretty good life-stable income, even making money from some rental properties.
Seemingly content, financially secure. Right, but then here's the thing. Yuki was engaged to be married to a 34-year-old woman named Kanakajima, and that kind of throws a wrench in that whole lonely suicide theory, doesn't it?
It does. It
Yeah.
introduces a whole new dimension to the situation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the possibility of a relationship gone wrong or even foul play.
And as investigators delved deeper, they uncovered another odd detail, something that could have easily been missed. Yuki's car keys were missing.
Now that's interesting, isn't it? Because you wouldn't typically expect someone committing suicide inside their car to dispose of the keys beforehand.
Right, it's a small detail, but it's a significant one, and it really suggests that something just isn't adding up.
It's often those seemingly insignificant details that can unravel a whole case, isn't it? Those little inconsistencies that don't quite fit the expected pattern.
And that brings us to Kanakajima, the fiance. And right off the bat, there are some red flags. How is she so financially well off without a job? And perhaps even more disturbing, a number of her previous partners had also died under, well, let's just say questionable circumstances.
Multiple deaths connected to a single person that always warrants further investigation, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, it's a huge red flag. And the media, of course, they picked up on this pretty quickly, branding Kane the Black Widow. And the public was absolutely hooked.
Cases like this tend to capture the public's imagination, don't they? They challenge our understanding of human behavior, especially when it involves betrayal and possible malice within intimate relationships.
So that's what we're going to do in this deep dive. We're going to go beyond those headlines and really dig into the details of this case and try to understand the context, what made this story so compelling to an entire nation.
Exactly. We'll dissect the narrative, the social and psychological landscape to better understand the motivations and the actions of those involved.
Right, so let's start at the beginning. Kane Kajima was born in 1974 in Naku, Japan. She was the eldest child, and you might be surprised to hear this, but she came from a wealthy family.
Interesting. So her actions weren't driven by poverty or deprivation.
Nope. Her father was a notary. Her mother, a piano teacher, pretty well off, but their names, like in many high-profile cases in Japan, were protected by law.
So right from the start, we see that her motivations are likely more complex than simple financial need.
And apparently she was a gifted pianist, giving concerts, winning competitions, even as a child, but she also had this other passion, cooking. Her mother really encouraged this, wanting her to be a good wife, those traditional expectations, even in a wealthy family.
The juxtaposition of talents and aspirations, the arts and domesticity, quite fascinating.
But things weren't always easy at home. Her father was incredibly strict, very rigid schedules, and he gave her a tiny allowance, to teach her the value of money, the importance of frugality.
A lesson she clearly didn't take to heart.
No, not at all. She excelled in school, but she really resented that small allowance. She craved luxury. She wanted those designer clothes and bags that her limited funds just couldn't buy.
So this desire for material possessions, this yearning for a lifestyle beyond her means, seems to have been present from a very early age.
And then it escalated as a teenager. She stole a significant sum of money from her father to buy the things she wanted, the clothes, the bags.
And what was her reaction when she was caught?
Well, she was caught, of course, and her allowance was cut even further, but there was no remorse, no real sense of guilt, which is pretty alarming when you think about it.
That lack of remorse at such a young age can be a worrying sign.
Yeah, okay.
It suggests a potential difficulty with empathy or a distorted sense of entitlement.
And then this pattern of seeking financial gain, it took an even darker turn while still a student. She started offering companionship to older men in exchange for money.
So the seeds of her future actions were already being sown, manipulating relationships for financial benefit.
One of these relationships with a 40-year-old client led to her stealing a substantial amount of money from a classmate's bank account. They were both caught. The client ended up in prison, and Kanae, because she was still a minor, received a suspended sentence.
So even at this early stage, there's a documented history of deceit and criminal activity.
Right, and despite all of this, she managed to graduate with good grades, even moved to Tokyo to study economics, but she dropped out pretty quickly. She prioritized making money over building a career.
A clear indication of where her priorities lay: immediate gratification over long-term goals.
Exactly. She found work as a waitress, but that wasn't enough to support the lifestyle she desired. So she started supplementing her income through petty theft, stealing cosmetics, clothes, cash, anything she could get her hands on.
This escalating pattern of criminal behavior suggests a growing sense of impunity, coupled with an insatiable desire for material possessions.
And here's an important detail to consider: her appearance. She was described as being about 150 centimeters tall and weighing over 100 kilograms. This made it difficult for her to find work as a hostess in Tokyo, where those strict beauty standards are prevalent.
Right, and this is crucial to understanding her later choices, isn't it? This potential feeling of being marginalized or excluded based on her appearance might have played a role in her targeting men who were perhaps less focused on conventional attractiveness.
And then she met a pimp who became a sort of mentor to him, and he gave her some chilling advice. Target lonely, insecure, middle-aged, or elderly men, those who might feel overlooked or undesirable to other women.
A calculated strategy designed to exploit vulnerability and desperation.
Exactly. And Kanae, she became incredibly skilled at identifying these men's weaknesses, offering them this carefully constructed illusion of affection, making them feel seen and desired.
A manipulative tactic preying on their deep-seated need for connection.
And it's important to remember that all of this is happening against the backdrop of a major social issue in Japan: loneliness. It's been a significant problem since the 1980s, millions of people living in isolation.
Exacerbated by the demanding work culture, traditional gender roles, and those strict beauty standards you mentioned earlier, it creates a perfect storm for vulnerability.
And Kanae, she specifically targeted men who were desperate to avoid dying alone, men who saw her attention as their last chance at happiness. Her tactics were always the same: outgoing, cheerful, cooking elaborate meals, showering them with compliments, offering them a break from those societal pressures.
Creating a sense of comfort and belonging, a temporary escape from their loneliness.
She even used an alias Kura, and she would invent these elaborate backstories. Sometimes she was the daughter of a prestigious professor, other times a nurse, a therapist, a famous chef. It all added to this mystique.
Constructing these elaborate facades to further entice and entrap her victims.
One of her first known victims was Snow Fukuyama, a 70-year-old man she met in a bar in 2001. He was known to be cautious with his money, but within just 2 weeks, they're in a relationship.
That's incredibly fast. It speaks to her manipulative abilities, doesn't it, to gain someone's trust so quickly?
She told him this elaborate story about her parents dying in a plane crash, which prevented her from attending a prestigious music academy in Boston. He felt sorry for her, promised to cover her expenses. She promised to visit him from Boston every month. He believed she was his fiancée.
Playing on his empathy and his desire for companionship, a classic con artist tactic.
And then, as you might expect, once she had drained his savings, she disappeared. He was devastated, but there wasn't enough evidence to press charges. He died a few months later under suspicious circumstances.
A heartbreaking outcome, and sadly a pattern that would repeat itself.
Fast forward to 2008, online dating is becoming increasingly popular, and Kanae, she sees this as a new opportunity.
Expanding her reach, finding more potential victims.
She creates multiple profiles using that alias Kura, and she's looking for serious relationships. Marriage is always the goal, but she's like a chameleon. She tailors her persona to each man she's talking to.
Adapting to their interests, their desires, mirroring their needs.
Exactly. If a man loves animals, she's a pet shop owner. If he's looking for a caregiver, she's a nurse. She always emphasizes her cooking skills, her caring nature, how much she wants to settle down.
Creating this illusion of the perfect partner, preying on their loneliness and their desire for a traditional family life.
She meets Kauter, a 53-year-old systems engineer. He's got a good job, but he's incredibly lonely. His friends are all married with families. He only really talks to his mother and sister who live far away.
A prime target, isolated, vulnerable, craving connection.
He connects with Kanae online, and she quickly convinces him that she wants to marry him. Starts asking for money for various expenses. He's overjoyed at the prospect of not being alone anymore.
A classic case of someone so desperate for love and companionship that they become blind to the red flags.
And around the same time, she also meets Kenzo Ioto, an 80-year-old man from a well-respected family. His father was a famous painter. He has this valuable art collection, and his health is failing.
Targeting someone with both wealth and vulnerability. A dangerous combination.
She becomes his maid, and Cook gains his trust completely. He lends her all of his savings, even gives her a key to his house. Then his health takes a turn for the worse. He ends up in a coma in the hospital, and while he's there, Kane steals his paintings, sells them for a huge profit.
Exploiting his trust and his helplessness, a truly despicable act.
And it's not just him during this time. She's conning at least 6 other men out of large sums of money. She's juggling multiple victims simultaneously.
A web of deceit spun across a network of vulnerable individuals.
And while Mr. Ayoto is in the hospital completely helpless, Kane visits Kauter. She brings a powerful sedative with her drugs. His food waits for him to pass out, moves him to the bedroom, seals the doors and windows, places charcoal on lint electric burners, and leaves, taking his money, his keys, his computer.
A calculated and chilling escalation of her methods, moving from financial exploitation to something far more sinister.
Kauter's supervisor reports him missing. The police find him dead. The only recent contacts on his phone besides his family are with Kura Kane.
The evidence is starting to point in her direction.
She tells the police the same story, mentally unstable, suicidal, after she rejected his marriage proposal, and with no obvious signs of foul play, they initially believe her.
The tendency to accept suicide as an explanation, especially in a context where it's sadly not uncommon, can hinder investigations.
Then, Kenzo Ayoto makes a miraculous recovery, comes home from the hospital, and unbelievably, Kane visits him again and repeats the whole process, the sedatives, the charcoal, the sealed room. But this time, a fire breaks out, and Mr. Ayoto dies from the burns.
Accident or something more deliberate?
Well, the autopsy reveals high levels of sedatives in his system, but authorities still rule it an accident despite the clear red flags.
Those red flags should have been impossible to ignore, but sometimes those initial assumptions can be difficult to overcome.
And then in July 2009, Yuki comes into the picture. He's 49, has a good job, loves his mother and Kane. She presents herself as a postgraduate student needing financial help, and of course, a potential husband.
The pattern is repeating itself, isn't it? The vulnerable man, the fabricated backstory, the promises of marriage.
They get engaged very quickly, make wedding plans. She convinces him to transfer 3 million yen for her studies.
The same playbook, different victim.
They plan a trip to visit his mother to introduce his fiancée. Yuki even documents the whole thing on his blog posts about their wedding date, how excited he is.
Creating this public image of happiness and commitment. A cruel facade.
The night before the trip, she drugs his dinner. Then they drive to Fuji. They stop at a secluded parking area. Yuki's feeling drowsy, and while he's unconscious, she lights the charcoal, locks him in the car, and leaves. But this time she makes a mistake. She takes the keys with her, and a security camera catches her leaving the scene.
A crucial error. A piece of evidence that directly contradicts her usual narrative of suicide.
The police find Yuki's body, initially assume suicide, but the missing keys, no suicide note, no charcoal residue on his clothes or hands, doesn't add up. His mother insists he was happy, looking forward to the future. His blog posts confirm this.
The inconsistencies are mounting. The evidence is pointing towards something more sinister.
The autopsy reveals carbon monoxide poisoning, but also traces of those sedatives. And finally, the police connect this death to the 2 previous deaths. They start to see the pattern.
The dots are starting to connect to serial predators emerging.
They have the security camera footage. They analyze Yuki's computer, find his conversations with Kane. They bring her in for questioning. She tells them the same story, the rejected proposal, the suicidal tendencies. But this time they have a file on her. They know about the previous deaths, the financial scams.
They're onto her, but they need more concrete evidence to build a solid case.
They release her, but put her under surveillance. You'd think she'd lay low, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But hubris can be a powerful motivator.
She doesn't. She contacts another man, 43 years old. This time, she's an American culinary student stranded in Japan with family problems, financial troubles. She offers to give up everything to be with him.
Same tactics, different disguise, but the underlying goal is the same.
And within days, he sends her 1.7 million yen. She moves into his home, buys 2 electric burners online, and disconnects the fire alarm system.
Chilling premeditation, a clear indication of intent.
Luckily, his sister is suspicious of her. She visits, sees what's happening, and goes straight to the
A
police.
stroke of luck, a life saved by a concerned family member.
They arrest Kane finally on charges of fraud. They search her room and find the disabled fire alarm, the sedatives records of the electric burner purchases.
The missing pieces of the puzzle falling into place, the evidence mounting.
In January 2010, she's charged with multiple counts of fraud, and then a month later, despite the lack of a definitive autopsy in Kauter's case, she's also charged with his murder.
The weight of the circumstantial evidence, the pattern of behavior, It's all pointing towards her guilt.
The trial captivates the entire nation. People line up for days to try and get a seat in the courtroom. She pleads innocent, claims the deaths were accidents or suicides. Her lawyers focus on the lack of direct evidence.
A classic defense strategy when circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. Poke holes in the narrative, create doubt.
But the prosecution, they lay out the case meticulously. She was the last person to see each victim alive. They all died in similar ways, with traces of those sedatives in their system, which she had access to. She stole from them. She benefited financially from their deaths.
A compelling narrative built on a mountain of circumstantial evidence.
And on April 13, 2012, the jury finds her guilty of 3 counts of murder. The judge sentences her to death. The Black Widow moniker is cemented in the public consciousness.
Justice served, but it doesn't erase the tragedy of the loss of life, the devastation caused by her actions.
In this case, it really sparked a lot of discussion about loneliness in Japan, about the vulnerability of men seeking connection, about the deceptive nature of appearances.
It challenged societal norms and forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior.
And then there's the aftermath. Kanae, while on death row, maintains a website. She attracts admirers, financial support people, send her money to improve her prison conditions.
A strange and unsettling twist. A convicted murderer garnering sympathy and support.
She even gets married multiple times while in prison, divorces one husband after he can no longer support her, then remarries a real estate businessman, then again to someone who works for her book's publisher.
The need for attention, the manipulation, it seems to persist even within the confines of prison.
She writes her memoirs, which are published in a magazine. She even writes an autobiographical novel. She's constantly in the public eye.
Maintaining control of her narrative, seeking validation even from behind bars.
Her death sentence has been reviewed multiple times. Some argue it's too harsh because of her appearance, which raises a whole other set of issues about societal biases. But as of 2019, her sentence still stands, although she hasn't been executed.
A complex legal battle with ethical considerations on both sides.
The Black Widow of Japan remains in prison, still outgoing, still attracting attention, still manipulating those around her.
A chilling reminder that evil can take many forms, and that vulnerability can be exploited in the most unexpected ways.
So what can we learn from this deeply disturbing case?
I think it highlights the dangers of loneliness and isolation, the desperate need for connection that can make people vulnerable to manipulation.
And the importance of looking beyond appearances, recognizing the red flags, the inconsistencies that can signal something far more sinister is at play.
And ultimately, it forces us to confront the dark side of human nature, the capacity for cruelty and deceit that exists even in the most unexpected individuals.
It's a lot to think about, isn't it? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into one of Japan's most notorious criminal cases.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fascinating, if disturbing, exploration of the human psyche.
And to our listeners out there, be careful who you trust, and always remember that things are not always as they seem.
Be aware of the signs of manipulation, and never be afraid to ask questions or seek help if something feels wrong.
Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Until then, take care.
Bye.